Welcome to the local Yocal Midweek Report, where we give you a quick overview of the news in Idaho for the last week. Hey, glad to have you here with us. Our first story here, as teased, House Bill 710 goes into effect. Libraries begrudgingly comply on it. This comes by a couple different sources. The overarching thing is that House Bill 710 aims to protect minors from harmful materials in libraries. It went into effect on July 1st. Several libraries across the state have been working on implementing various strategies based on the new law. The main one that we've seen and people are wanting to see with the passage of the bill is just plain out removing the inappropriate content from the shelves, so you don't have to worry about it. But others have taken different approaches instead of removing it altogether. The most common one has been creating an adult section. So the library has a kids section and then an adult section for content. And then also restricting those who can sue and challenge on the books. The one I think I saw was something over there in Ada County where it's only those that are registered in the school district or something. So if you're homeschooling, it sounds like sucks to be you. For those overall, it's seen by more traditional families and conservatives as a culture war victory, pushing it back against the left and protecting children from inappropriate content they shouldn't be seeing. However, those that are more left-leaning activists argue it infringes on free speech and talking about gender identity topics in a public school setting. Those, however, on the more left-leaning side of things, activists and stuff have been arguing that it infringes on gender identity topics and free speech. Now, with that said, to those that are more over on the left-leaning, library officials have emphasized that they're not eliminating books wholesale, but rather ensuring that there's age-appropriate access based on the bill. So it'll be interesting to see going forward if there's any lawsuits that'll come because of the thing or not. But either way, very interesting. I think a good step moving forward for Idaho. But another thing that has been hot in the political area is ranked choice voting. There was a recent report here that came out by the Idaho Secretary of State, Phil McCain, that looked at the cost of implementing a ranked choice voting system here in Idaho. And the price tag is, it's a little bit high. If you have a guess, I'll pause here for a second. But the answer that he gave was about $25 to $40 million, which is quite staggering. The initial estimated cost by the group that's been pushing it was $1.6 million, so a little bit higher than they're saying on their price tag there. Now, obviously, the question then becomes is why is it so expensive? There's two main reasons. The current one is that our voting machines that we have here in Idaho work on our current system, and they're not really programmed or designed in such a way to work on a ranked choice voting system. So all of them would have to be replaced to make this whole thing work. And then the second is ranked choice voting does not really work well on a non-internet based system. Right now in Idaho, the system isn't technically hooked up to the internet when you're voting. Humans then transfer that data in a sense manually rather than the systems themselves being logged on to try to see other things and calculate it, because ranked choice voting is a little odd that way. Now, obviously with a price tag like that, you're like, why is there such a high cost? Well, it comes with two reasons. The current one is that our voting machines that we have would need to all be replaced because they really don't work on a ranked choice voting system. One of those elements is that they need to be hooked up to the internet to communicate, to figure out first, second, and third choices and all those different things. So the whole system would have to be replaced to make that work. Also throwing in a little bit of dangerous security there because you're connecting it up to the internet. And then also we would have to expand a thing across the entire state to educate, a campaign on that, about how the ranked choice voting works for both voters and those working in the campaign stuff. Alaska's campaign that they had to do on that was $3.5 million to get the whole job done. And they don't have, I think they may even have less of a population than we do. And even separate from the cost, ranked choice voting could also delay election results, which, if it delays election results, that allows more time for cheating to happen. There's a reason that your passcodes have on your two-factor rotate in a certain amount of time because it makes it harder to guess them and to hack them and to breach them and stuff. Same with election results. If you need those results in under 24 hours, there's a lot less finagling statewide that can happen. All in all, it seems like it's a bit of a gamble on Idaho's elections to try to make them more open, which is the idea behind it, while possibly in the process destroying them. Not so great there. Also, speaking of something that seems like quite a gamble, electric vehicles, Idaho is nearing a decision on EV charging locations across the state. This comes by the East Idaho News by Mia Maldonado of the Idaho Capital Sun. Idaho is closing in on selecting some locations for federal funding for electric vehicle charging stations. The state has been doing this for a little bit, looking at compiling a study and getting public feedback, assessing what potential locations they would put them there. Some of the factors that they've considered when doing this is the local power supply. You don't want to put a big charger somewhere where it can't be handled. Traffic, where there's actually a lot of people moving, and it'll be good for that. Nearby amenities, so if you're charging for 45 minutes, you've got somewhere to stop. And then also the biggest thing, because welcome to the federal government being the funder of this, is looking at tribal communities. Is it close to them or low income and stuff like that? This comes from the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Forum program, which aims to have charging stations every 50 miles across the country. For the initial batch here in Idaho for chargers, they're looking at Pocatello, Bliss, and Lewiston. They're also having a virtual public meeting that is scheduled for July 31st to provide more information for stakeholders and those that want to invest in it. But moving forward, the final decision will be made later this year after reviewing final applications, because it's something where you're having private money asking for money for the federal government, and they're building it out, and the feds just, I think, fitting it up to about 80% or something like that. State officials have emphasized their diligence in maximizing the program's budget, effectiveness, and supporting EV charging networks across Idaho. So basically saying, hey, we're not wasting your money. This is an important thing, so keep letting us spend money on all this. So it'll be interesting to see moving forward. I know Idaho has some pretty high numbers in the nation when it comes to electric vehicles, so the demand is reasonably high there, but like most electric vehicles, there's a little bit of skepticism. Another thing that's not on the brightest terms, but working our way through the political stuff, is unemployment is edging up here in Idaho. This comes by KTVB7 by Richard Rodriguez. Idaho's employment rate ticked up slightly here in June, rising from about 3.3% to 3.4%, according to the Idaho Department of Labor. Unemployment increased by about 578 people to 33,162 compared to last year. But when you look at last year compared to it, unemployment is about 3% higher, with about 3,988 more unemployed Idahoans. Granted, with that said, there are some other interesting numbers that are included in here. Total employment also grew by about 1,649 to a total of about 944,740. The state's labor force has expanded by about 2,227 people to reach a total of about 977,902. Also, that employment has increased by about 1.3%, or about 12,422 people. Another thing that they wanted to note in the report is that non-farming jobs rose by about 1,800 to a total of about 871,100. Possible reasons for this is that several job sectors saw growth, including federal government and private educational services, because woohoo, we like all the things that get government funding. But there was a decline in natural resources, and other services are experiencing a little bit of a loss, so they're wondering if that's where that's happening. It will be interesting to see what these numbers look at as we go into the winter compared to summertime, and also after the election, depending on who's voted in and all that fun stuff. Which, if you liked hearing about this and hadn't heard about this info before about stuff in Idaho, do us a favor and hit the like button on YouTube, Rumble, or Twitter. It helps us reach more folks who love Idaho just like you. And speaking of something that we don't like, though, the Bench Lake fire over at Stanley is turning out to be a little bit of a smoky summer battle. This comes by several sources. The Bench Lake fire near Stanley has continued to grow, challenging firefighters. It has grown to about 2,037 acres with only 8% contained of it. The burn started and has been going since July 17th, so it's been going for a little bit now. The fire has caused the Redfish Lake and the surrounding recreational stuff to be closed down there in the lodge and things, which has not been good at all. I know many people that have been wanting to go and just couldn't because of the fire. Currently, there's a team of about 346 firefighters who are working to fight the fire, but they're running into several difficulties. They've used a couple different tactics. One of them I know is backfiring to try to burn away different contents so that there isn't fuel for the fire. They've used boats on Redfish Lake to fire back at it. And then the main one, which we talked about last week with the helicopter crash, is they've been using aircraft and different stuff as well to dump water on it. One of the main reasons for the difficulty, however, of them trying to fight it and not being able to use as many resources as they normally would, is that the terrain is very, very steep, making it hard to suppress and control the fire. Those in the local area have set up a GoFundMe page to help the Redfish Lodge employees, because normally they've been getting money this time of year, a lot of it, because Redfish Lake gets a lot of tourism. Also, officials up there are asking visitors to avoid the area. For those of us that aren't in the news stuff, that go and maybe shoot footage or different things, probably a good idea to stay away for both your lungs and just anything in general. And also for the locals there, they're asking for them to be ready and alert if evacuation is needed if the fire catches on something or moves a bit quicker. So our thoughts and prayers will be with you all up there. I know the Stanley area is just super, super pretty, and it's sad to hear about the fire. Thankfully, it's not in some of the prettiest area of it. It's over by a different direction, but it's sad that it's closed down the camping season and it's being so difficult to contain. Staying in the mountainous area, but just moving a little bit to the east over by McCall. We've talked about this before, but the Shore Lodge has a new owner. This comes by the Boise Dev by Donde. The Scouts camp up there in McCall went up for sale, and a buyer has been found, which is All Scots Real Estate LLC. All Scots is controlled by the descendants of Joe Albertsons, so a little bit of context there, and the children of Joseph B. Scott. The All Scots also own the Shore Lodge and the Whitetail Golf Club up there in McCall. So they've got some pretty strong, deep roots there in the McCall area between all of those, because there's some big places there. The All Scots' general intention, a spokesperson emphasized that they were committed to preserving the land and the community around it, not changing it too drastically or majorly. They stated no immediate plans, however, for the development. So basically a bunch of, don't worry, but we don't know what we're doing yet, so you don't need to worry because we don't have anything planned. The Scouting America will continue to use the camp, though, for the next 2 or more years, so they're not going to be completely out of there. For those that didn't listen to our original one or catch it last week, the deal was set on June 28th. And then Scouting America is just having plans to move and invest more over in their Stanley facility. It definitely is a significant change for them in the direction they've gone. The camp has been there since 1966 and was dedicated to Morrison Cudson and founder Harry W. Morrison. So it's been a bit. It'll be interesting to see what All Scott will do with the camp, if they're going to just keep it the way it is and open their own camp, or convert it into something else or a resort that would complement the Shore Lodge there. Staying with activities, because you usually do those at summer camps, but moving a little bit more over towards eastern Idaho. This comes by the East Idaho News by staff. A new pickleball court will be opening at the Tautphaus Park from July 18th when it first opens to the 24th. The facility will be free to celebrate its launch, so if you've never played pickleball, might be a cool thing to go check out. The general description of the court is that it has 3 of those are for reservation if you want to do stuff ahead or just have it all to yourself, and 2 of those are drop-in and play ones, so don't have to have a reservation, just come in. Granted, you might have to fight for those a little bit more because there might be some people already there. As for the cost associated with it, after the first free week, it'll be $5 per hour for residents and $6 per hour for non-residents, so a little bit of incentive to be living in the area and those that are living there. As for hours and availability, it'll be open daily from 8 a.m. to noon and then from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. So a little bit of a gap there for some maintenance stuff. It sounds like a perfect place to go and enjoy I swear it's like one of the fastest growing sports here in America. Everyone seems to enjoy it, and especially here in Idaho. Plus, it'll be indoors, so it should be a little bit cooler and you'll be able to beat the heat. Which, if you want to share with friends and family about the new development there and also hopefully get a free taste of what pickleball is, don't hesitate to share. Your shares can help us spread the word about our beautiful state and all these wonderful stories that we get to talk about each week. You have something you might want to share. We got another story here by the Boise Dev by Margaret Carmel. There are 2 Boise pools that will be getting a full-on makeover. This comes after a couple years of discussion. The Boise City Council has approved plans for 2 pools that have been closed since 2020. So a little bit of time since the COVID era. That feels like yesterday, but man, time flies by. The Lowell pool in the north end will be the first one of those to be refurbed. It'll have its refurbishment at its location and will cost an estimated $9.2 million. Hey, look, a little bit cheaper than the educational program for ranked choice voting. And then the south pool, which is going to be relocated to the Whitney Elementary School. In its relocation, it'll be transformed into a larger 8-lane pool with improved amenities and accessibility for different people there. The estimated cost for that conversion and the whole move over is going to be about $7.8 million. But for context, like most of these things, there's a little bit of lead up because city councils and stuff do that. The topic sparked a considerable amount of debate at the city council, usually does when things take a little longer, with some advocating for more public input. In the end, Mary Lauren McCain broke the tie, ultimately arguing that the city of Boise needs to invest more in the bench area and doesn't want to neglect it. As for the timeline of when you can expect the pools to be done, construction should begin in the next year, aiming for about a 2026 opening, pending resolution of a funding gap. So there's a little bit of gap in there where there's some funds needed. They're also talking a little bit about repurposing the historic South Pool structure. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that pans out there and works for them. Also, speaking of things over there in Boise and changing a little bit over to transit, this also comes by the Boise Dev by Dawn Day. The Valley Regional Transit has secured a $16.7 million federal grant to revamp Boise's public transportation system. Revamp being a strong word, probably add some improvements. This funding is intended to go towards improving the Boise Town Square Center, a little bit more for the infrastructure side of it, things, adding some new waiting areas for the buses, I'm assuming, and transportation stuff, adding some solar panels for charging, because we love solar. Everyone loves more solar panels. They're cool. They're the future. And then adding some more public restrooms. Granted, all these kind of aren't transportation related, but grants, usually there's other things put in there. But a lot of those are just a bunch of filler things. The main ticket item that's being talked about with this grant allows for the purchase of 6 more battery electric buses, which helps with Ada County's goal of an all-electric fleet by 2030. Man, that's far way off, but it'll be here before you know it. The current fleet consists of about 12 electric buses with 11 more on order, so this is complementing their overall goal of having more of those, which if you've been in downtown Boise, you've probably seen them. It's nice. They're not quite as loud and just wheeze past, but probably the thing you're thinking like I am is, where is this money coming from? The grant was supported by a push by Idaho's congressional delegation and Ada County overall, because climate things, and that's the world we live in. The Valley Regional Transit CEO Elena Clegg emphasized the grant's importance in developing a more sustainable transit system for the region. It'll be interesting to see how these help. I mean, with public, I think it makes a certain amount of sense with the electric vehicles. They take less maintenance, in theory, less downtime, less costs. Buses seem to be something we as Americans struggle with. We like our independence, and since we got introduced to cars, we love those a lot. Granted, trains might be an interesting thing to come back to. Another thing down there in Boise to talk about that's unique, especially with the geothermal side of things, and this comes by the Boise Dev by Margaret Carmel, is that the Boise Council has approved changes to the geothermal extension program, which, for those that haven't been in Boise, and for me, even growing up, you might be wondering, wait, geothermal extension plan? What is that? In some ways, glad you asked. It is a decade-old policy that provides free hookups for downtown properties in Boise to the existing geothermic system. It heats the Capitol and a lot of different things down there because they've tapped into the geothermal that's there to heat stuff. The new change will require property owners to cover the cost of connections, so not quite as much of a free lunch there. However, some exceptions may be made in special circumstances for different businesses or building. Basically might mean that if the city council wants to be nice and do someone a favor, or for climate reasons, they might add that on. The main reasons for the change is basically money. The shift aims to increase revenue to improvements to the system and its overall stability, just so that you're getting money to pay to fix things and stuff, and you're not requiring on tax dollars. You can generate revenue from people hooking into it. The Boise Geothermal manager made a couple of notes. One, that the original program was successful in expanding the system to more buildings to get more business to jump on it and not having to use more things that would go to the grid. But the reason has changed for why you would hook up. Originally, it was for cost reasons, but now the desire is more from an environmental perspective of trying to save the planet and stuff. But moving forward, Boise is in talks with 17 property owners for new connections, so we'll have to see how that progresses. There is also a part that the city council was stating that they may reconsider or reevaluate connection rates if the hookup rate declines over time, so that cost analysis going on there. Which, if you don't want to miss out on learning more about Idaho or all these wonderful stories, make sure to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss any of our future content. And speaking of cost and return on investment, we have another story here. This comes by KTVB7 by Zoe Tuttle. The Great American Snacks, or a subsidiary of McCain Foods, has announced the closure of its Nampa plant, which will affect over about 250 employees. The operations will end in September of this year. Amy Griffith, a spokesperson for McCain Foods, said it was a difficult decision. For some context, the Nampa plant is closing down, but McCain Foods is not leaving Idaho altogether. According to a report they gave there, they've invested about $400 million in their eastern Idaho facilities since 2017, so they're not completely out of Idaho, it's just they're shifting. Moving forward with the shutdown, the company, as we've talked about, is going to be transferring its manufacturing to other facilities, primarily that one over in eastern Idaho and any others that they might have nearby. But they will be helping staff that was let go from the Nampa plant closing down to find jobs in the surrounding area or at other places. To that, the mayor over in Nampa, Debbie Kling, gave a statement on it. She expressed disappointment, but acknowledged McCain's efforts to care for its employees. Also trying to encourage those that lost their jobs at the Nampa plant that there are other food-based jobs in Nampa for those that are affected that are open and available for them. Which brings us to the end of the Midweek Report. Thank you for listening to the entire report. I sincerely hope you found it valuable and enjoyable. If you like the Midweek Report, make sure to check out the Sunday show where John and I talk about the main stories going on in Idaho. Lately, we've been doing an Idaho bill breakdown where we look at the bills that have been signed, like House Bill 710. I think we've gone through that one. There are other ones that have gone into effect, so I want to check that out. Also, if we missed any important points or provided incorrect information, please feel free to reach out to us via email at lyimedia@protonmail.com or on Twitter by tweeting me at local Yocal Idaho. Small team we have, we're not able to cover everything, but we do our best to cover the most interesting and important stories. Thank you for your continued support and assistance. That's all for now, and I wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Godspeed.